The first child I ever helped deliver did not cry. It smiled. Not the uncertain twitch of a newborn learning its face. A smile, slow, deliberate, as if it recognized me long before I recognized it. If I had listened to the old woman who warned me that afternoon, perhaps everything that happened afterward would have remained buried beneath the red soil of OBY'S. But young people rarely understand that some warnings are not meant to stop your curiosity. They are meant to preserve your future. There is a particular kind of confidence that belongs only to people who have never seen the impossible. It is not courage. Courage understands danger. This confidence knows only logic. It believes every strange story has an ordinary explanation waiting patiently beneath it. Every curse is ignorance. Every spirit is fear. Every elder is exaggerating. Adaobi believed all of those things. She believed them because she had spent 4 years studying nursing in Enugu before returning to her hometown with certificates, fresh ideas, and the stubborn certainty that education had replaced superstition. She was 26 years old enough to earn respect, young enough to mistake knowledge for complete understanding. The village welcomed her home like rain after a long harmattan. For years, OBY'S had depended on one aging traditional birth attendant. Mama Nkem had delivered nearly everyone under 40 in the village. People trusted her hands more than hospitals. She knew herbs that reduced bleeding. She could turn stubborn babies before labor became dangerous. She remembered family histories without writing a single word. But age had finally begun collecting its debts. Her knees protested every journey. Her eyesight blurred after sunset. The women whispered that it was time for someone younger to continue the work. That someone became Adaobi. Not because Mama Nkem chose her, because the village chose for both of them. The first weeks passed quietly. Babies arrived exactly as babies had always arrived. Some loud, some sleepy, some impatient enough to greet the world with tiny, angry fists. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Morning consultations, afternoon visits, evening walks beneath mango trees while neighbors stopped her to ask about fevers, swollen ankles, or stubborn coughs. It was peaceful. Perhaps that was why she ignored the first strange thing. No matter where she went, dogs refused to come near her medical bag. Not bark, not growl, simply back away, tails lowered, eyes fixed on the worn brown leather satchel Mama Nkem had insisted she use instead of the modern backpack she preferred. "You'll understand one day, Mama," Adaobi laughed. "I have sterile equipment now. And yet, you'll carry my bag." The old woman never explained why. She simply smiled in that quiet way elders smile when they already know which lesson life intends to teach you. Adaobi accepted the bag mostly to avoid arguing. It smelled faintly of camphor and dried leaves. Nothing more. Or so she believed. Before this story continues, let me greet everyone gathered around this fire tonight. If this is your first evening with us, welcome home. Tell us where you're listening from. Whether you're watching from Aba, Accra, Johannesburg, London, or Toronto, or somewhere between two small villages the maps forgot, write your city below. Our ancestors believe stories grow stronger each time they crossed another river. Perhaps this one will reach yours tonight. And if you enjoy stories that keep old African wisdom alive, remember to subscribe before we continue. Now, you should understand something about OBY'S. Because villages are like people. Each one carries a secret it prefers strangers never discover. OBY'S was prosperous, not wealthy, prosperous. Its farms rarely failed. Its streams never completely dried. Even during difficult years, no family ever slept hungry for long. Travelers often remarked that the village seemed unusually fortunate. The elders would only nod politely. Fortune, they believed, should never be discussed too loudly. It attracts listeners, especially the unseen kind. At the northern edge of the village stood an iroko tree so enormous that 5 grown men holding hands could barely second its trunk. Children never climbed it. Goats wandered around it instead of beneath it. Birds landed on every nearby branch except its own. When Adaobi asked why, people answered exactly the same way. It has always been like that. She disliked answers that began with always. Always was another word people used when they had stopped asking questions. So one afternoon, she walked toward the tree alone. Halfway there, she noticed something curious. The ground surrounding the iroko remained damp despite 3 weeks without rain. Tiny white flowers grew in a perfect circle around its roots. She knelt to inspect them. Medicinal, perhaps. She reached toward one. Adaobi. Mama Nkem's voice cut through the afternoon air. Sharp, urgent, not loud, the kind of voice that made people stop before understanding why. Adaobi looked back. The old woman stood nearly 30 meters away, leaning on her carved walking stick. For someone whose knees supposedly ached every morning, she had crossed half the village surprisingly quickly. Leave the flowers. They are beautiful. They are not for picking. Adaobi smiled. Poisonous? Mama Nkem considered the question carefully. No. Protected? Another pause. Witnesses. The answer hung between them like smoke. Adaobi frowned. Witnesses to what? The old woman turned around before replying. Questions asked too early seldom receive truthful answers. That evening, Adaobi mentioned the strange conversation while eating dinner with her father. He chuckled. Mama Nkem has spoken like that since before I was born. So nobody knows what she means? Oh, everyone thinks they do. And? He reached for another piece of roasted yam. The clever people laugh. The old people stay quiet. And you? He looked toward the dark window before answering. I've lived long enough to know there are 2 kinds of mysteries. The first disappears once you investigate. And the second? The second notices you are investigating. Adaobi rolled her eyes. You too? He laughed. I said I've lived long enough. Not convinced. Later that night, unable to sleep, Adaobi unpacked Mama Nkem's leather bag for the first time. Most of its contents made sense. Bandages, herbs, scissors, clean cloth, needles. Then she discovered a small compartment sewn into the lining, hidden. Inside rested an old bronze bell, no larger than a chicken egg. No handle, no decoration, just a smooth metal bell wrapped carefully in faded red cloth. It had no clapper inside. Impossible to ring. Or so it seemed. She turned it over in her hand. The metal felt strangely warm despite the cool night air. From somewhere outside, every dog in the village began to howl at exactly the same moment. Adaobi froze. The bell vibrated once, barely to notice. Then it became still again. She quickly wrapped it back inside the cloth. Outside, all the howling stopped, all at once, as though someone had given a silent command. She stared at the leather bag for a very long time. For the first time since returning home, a small crack appeared in her certainty. And 3 nights later, someone knocked on her door just before midnight. A woman was in labor. She had gone into labor 40 days too early. And above Umueze, the moon had begun to turn red. The messenger was barefoot. That was the first thing Adaobi noticed. Not because it was unusual. Many people in Umueze preferred walking barefoot at night. But because his feet were bleeding. Fresh cuts. Tiny ones. As though he had run through thorn bushes without stopping to feel the pain. He stood outside her father's compound, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling beneath a faded football jersey. Nurse? His voice cracked. It's Ngozi. Her pain started before sunset. They've become different. Adaobi reached for her medical bag. How long apart are the contractions? I don't know. They stopped counting. Who's with her? My mother. And Mama Nkem? The young man hesitated. We went to her house first. And? He swallowed. She refused. Adaobi looked up. Refused? He nodded. She said, he lowered his voice instinctively, she doesn't deliver children under a blood moon. Silence settled between them. Adaobi almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she slung the leather bag across her shoulder. Lead the way. The village changed after midnight. The same footpaths children raced through every afternoon became unfamiliar beneath crimson moonlight. Palm trees stretched longer shadows. Even insects seemed quieter. Only the distant chorus of frogs continued as though nothing unusual was happening. Adaobi noticed something else. Every compound they passed had its doors shut, not merely closed, bolted. No lanterns, no conversations drifting through windows. It was as though the entire village had agreed to disappear until morning. Where is everyone? The messenger kept walking. Inside. Why? No answer. She repeated the question. My grandmother says nobody should wonder when the moon drinks blood. Adaobi sighed. Your grandmother also thinks ginger cures broken bones. The young man managed a weak smile. True, but he didn't look convinced. Ngozi's house stood near the old stream. A crowd waited outside. No one spoke. They simply watched Adaobi arrive. Some looked relieved, others concerned. An elderly woman stepped forward. You came. Adaobi nodded. Of course. The woman's expression remained unreadable. I hope your education is stronger than our fear. Inside the hut, the air smelt of sweat, herbs, and burning palm oil. Ngozi lay on a woven mat, gripping the edges so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her mother knelt beside her, whispering prayers under her breath. Adaobi immediately switched into professional mode. Pulse, temperature, breathing. She timed another contraction. Strong. Too strong for someone this early. How many weeks? 34. Has there been bleeding? A little. Water broken? An hour ago. Everything pointed toward premature labor. Difficult, but manageable. She had handled worse during training. As she unpacked her instruments, Ngozi suddenly grabbed her wrist, hard, painfully hard. Her eyes were wide open, not with fear, recognition. You brought the bag. Adaobi blinked. What? The old woman's bag. Before Adaobi could answer, another contraction hit. Ngozi screamed. The grip loosened. Her mother quickly apologized. Forgive her. The pain is making her speak nonsense. Adaobi nodded. Still, something about the way Ngozi had said it unsettled her. Not frightened, relieved. Labor progressed quickly. Too quickly. Children born this early usually struggled. Yet the baby's heartbeat remained unusually steady, strong, almost impossibly strong. Another hour passed. Outside, thunder rolled across a clearless sky. Adaobi frowned. There shouldn't have been thunder, not tonight. Then she remembered. There weren't any clouds. She stepped toward the doorway. The sky remained perfectly clear. The sound came again. Not thunder, drumming. Very deep, slow, as if the earth itself possessed a heartbeat. Nobody else reacted. She looked at Ngozi's mother. You hear that? Hear what? The sound stopped. Perhaps exhaustion was beginning to play tricks on her. She returned to the delivery. The baby's head crowned. Everything appeared normal, except the room suddenly became colder. Not gradually, instantly. The small oil lamp flickered. Every flame in the room leaned toward the leather bag resting beside Adaobi. Not toward the open door, towards the bag. She stared. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then the flame straightened again. No one else noticed. Push. Ngozi obeyed. Another contraction, another push. The child entered the world. Silence. Adaobi immediately cleared the baby's airway. Nothing. She rubbed the tiny back. Still nothing. Around her, everyone stopped breathing. Then, the baby's eyes opened. Directly. Immediately. Newborns rarely focus. This one did. It looked straight at Adaobi, not past her, at her. Then, it smiled. The same slow smile. Calm. Knowing. The room remained completely silent. Ngozi whispered weakly, "Why isn't my baby crying?" Adaobi rubbed its back again, checked its pulse. Strong. Its breathing. Perfectly normal. No medical reason explained the silence. Then the baby reached out one tiny hand, not toward her mother, toward the leather bag. The bronze bell inside vibrated, softly. No sound emerged, yet everyone in the room flinched, even those who could possibly not know the bell existed. And finally, the baby cried. A loud, healthy cry that broke the strange stillness. The room erupted in relieved laughter. Ngozi burst into tears. Her mother thanked God repeatedly. Only Adaobi remained frozen. She could still feel the tiny fingers brushing against the leather satchel. By dawn, mother and child were resting comfortably. Every medical concern had disappeared. Premature, yes, but surprisingly healthy. The villagers called it a miracle. Adaobi preferred statistics. Sometimes, babies simply survived. That happened. Still, as she prepared to leave, Ngozi's grandmother stopped her outside. The old woman pressed 2 kola nuts in her palm. For protection. Adaobi smiled politely. "I don't really. You'll need them before the next moon." Her certainty in her voice erased Adaobi's smile. "What do you mean?" The old woman looked toward the eastern forest. They've started counting again. "Who?" No answer. Instead, the old woman asked, "Did the child cry immediately?" Adaobi hesitated. "No." "And did it smile first?" Her heartbeat quickened. "How did you know that?" The grandmother closed Adaobi's fingers around the kola nuts. "I was hoping I'd be wrong." When Adaobi returned home after sunrise, she found Mama Nkem sitting quietly on the veranda, as though she had been waiting all night. The old woman didn't ask about the delivery. She simply looked at the leather bag, then at Adaobi. "You opened the hidden pocket." It wasn't a question. Adaobi slowly nodded. Mama Nkem sighed. "I prayed your curiosity would wait another year." "You knew about the bell?" "I know what it keeps away." Adaobi sat beside her. "What exactly is happening?" The old woman was silent for so long that birds began singing before she finally spoke. "Tell me, did the child cry or smile?" Adaobi's face answered before her words did. Mama Nkem closed her eyes. For the first time since Adaobi had known her, the old woman looked afraid. Not frightened for herself, frightened for someone else. Then she whispered, "They know you've seen one." And somewhere beyond the northern iroko tree, a second bronze bell rang. This one loud enough for the entire village to hear. The sound rolled across Umueze like distant thunder. Not loud enough to shake the roofs, just loud enough that everyone stopped whatever they were doing. A woman drawing water from the stream paused with her bucket half raised. Children chasing a tire in the market froze. Even the village crier lowered the wooden gong in his hand and looked toward the northern forest. Only one bell rang. Then silence returned. The silence was worse. Adaobi looked at Mama Nkem. "You heard it too." The old woman nodded. "I was praying you wouldn't."
You said there wasn't supposed to be a clapper inside the bell. There isn't. Then how? I didn't say no bell could ring. She slowly stood, leaning on her walking stick. Come. Where? To the iroko tree. Adaobi frowned. Yesterday you wouldn't even let me touch the flowers. Yesterday isn't today. The path to the northern edge of the village felt different in daylight. Nothing had changed. The same cassava farm stretched across the fields. The same women spread maize beneath the sun. The same breeze carried the scent of smoked fish from the marketplace. Yet, conversation stopped as Adaobi and Mama Nkem passed. Eyes followed them, not curious, expectant. One elderly man quietly made the sign of blessing across his chest. Another turned away altogether. They know something. They know enough to stay alive, Mama Nkem replied. Then tell me. You will see faster than I can explain. When they reached the iroko tree, Adaobi noticed something she somehow missed before. The white flowers surrounding the trunk had wilted overnight, every single one. Their petals now lay flat against the damp earth like tiny folded hands. She knelt. The soil was still wet, not muddy, warm. Warm enough that steam rose faintly where sunlight touched it. She pressed 2 fingers into the ground. Heat, not imagined, real. There isn't any volcanic activity here. Mama Nkem smiled sadly. You still search for the right explanation. There has to be one. There always is. The old woman tapped the trunk gently with her stick. But the right explanation isn't always the comfortable one. Something glimmered between 2 roots, a piece of bronze. Adaobi carefully brushed away loose soil. Another bell, larger than the one inside her bag. This one was cracked almost down the middle. Unlike the first bell, it had no cloth around it, only age. She reached toward it. Mama Nkem did not stop her. You said not to touch things. I said not to touch the flowers. Adaobi lifted the bell. Cold, far colder than the morning air. The crack running through it looked ancient. Not almost. It looked repaired. She ran her thumb across the fracture. Someone had melted the bronze back together decades earlier. Why repair a broken bell only to bury it? Then she noticed writing. Tiny symbols carved inside the crack. Not Igbo, not English. Older, much older. Before she could study them further, footsteps approached. Fast. A boy no older than 12 burst through the bushes. Nurse! He was gasping. Is Chike? He collapsed. Chike was the blacksmith's eldest son. Strong, healthy, 16 years old. By the time Adaobi reached their family's compound, nearly half the village had gathered. The boy lay unconscious beneath a shade tree. His breathing was shallow. His skin burned with fever. No obvious injury, no snake bite, no swelling. She checked his pulse. Rapid, far too rapid. How long has he been like this? An hour. What happened before he collapsed? His younger sister answered. He kept hearing bells. The crowd exchanged uneasy glances. Bells? Adaobi asked. He said somebody was calling him. The little girl pointed toward the forest. He kept trying to follow the sound. Mama Nkem's expression hardened. What time did he hear them? The child looked toward the sky. When the sun was here, she pointed almost directly overhead. Noon, exactly when the mysterious bell had rung. Adaobi began treating the fever. Cool cloths, hydration, herbal supplements Mama Nkem quietly handed her. None of it helped. The fever climbed higher. Then, Chike suddenly opened his eyes. They were unfocused, looking through everyone, not at them. His lips moved. At first, the words were too soft to hear. Adaobi leaned closer. Not enough. What? Still counting. His breathing quickened. 8. Silence. 7.
He wasn't speaking to them. He was answering someone else. Mama Nkem grabbed Adaobi's arm. Move away. Before Adaobi could react, Chike sat upright with impossible speed. His eyes locked onto the leather bag. Not Adaobi, the bag. You shouldn't have carried it. His voice wasn't his own. Older, calmer, almost amused. The villagers stumbled backward. Someone screamed. Then, just as suddenly, Chike collapsed again, unconscious. This time, his fever began dropping. An hour later, the boy awoke with no memory of what had happened. He remembered eating lunch. Nothing after that. The village called it possession. Adaobi called it delirium. Yet, neither explanation satisfied her. Delirium didn't disappear that quickly, nor did it usually speak in complete sentences. As the crowd dispersed, Chike's father quietly approached her. Without speaking, he slipped something into her hand, a folded piece of yellowed paper. When my father died, the blacksmith whispered, he told me to give this only to the person carrying Mama Nkem's bag. Why me? He said I'd know. And you do. The blacksmith looked toward the leather satchel. I do. Back home, Adaobi unfolded the paper carefully. It wasn't a letter. It was a map, roughly drawn, charcoal on handmade paper. One location had been marked with a small red circle. Beside it, someone had written, "The third bell never rings alone." Nothing else. No signature, no date. Only a faded thimble in the corner. The same symbol carved under the cracked bronze bell beneath the iroko tree. Adaobi spread the map across the table. The marked location wasn't inside OBY'S. It lay deep within Ọchịchịrị Forest, a place even hunters avoided after sunset. Her father walked into the room carrying a lantern. He glanced at the map. His face lost all color. You need to burn that. You recognize it? He nodded slowly. When I was a boy, he stopped. No. What? I promised never to speak about that forest. Adaobi stood. People keep telling me half the story. And half the story is the safe half. She folded the map carefully. I'm going tomorrow. Her father looked at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he disappeared into his bedroom. When he returned, he placed an old hunting knife on the table. Its wooden handle had been polished smooth by decades of use. You'll need this. You think I'm going to fight something? No. He closed her fingers around the knife. I think you're going to have to cut something free. Outside, for the second night in a row, every dog in OBY'S began howling at precisely the same time. And somewhere deep inside Ọchịchịrị Forest, a child laughed. No child had entered that forest in over 40 years. Adaobi left before sunrise. She told no one except her father. Even then, she did not tell him everything, only that she intended to follow the map. He watched her secure Mama Nkem's leather bag across her shoulder and slide the old hunting knife into its sheath. You remember what I taught you? He asked. She nodded. When you lose your way in a forest, you stop walking. Listen first. He smiled faintly. Years ago, when she was a little girl, he had taught her how to hunt bush rabbits without ever firing a shot. He believed forests spoke before they trapped careless people. At the time, she thought it was simply another lesson from village life. She did not realize it would one day save her life. Ọchịchịrị Forest lived up to its name. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Birdsong faded. The wind disappeared. Even insects seemed unwilling to disturb whatever slept beneath the towering trees. Every few minutes, she checked the map. The red circle grew closer. Then she heard it. A bronze bell. One ring, then another. Not loud, almost inviting. She stopped walking. Her father's lesson returned to her. When you lose your way, stop. Listen first.
She closed her eyes. The bell sounded ahead, then behind, then to her left. It wasn't moving, the sound was. She opened her eyes. The path directly ahead looked freshly disturbed. Broken branches, bent grass, almost too obvious. Someone or something wanted her to follow it. Instead, she looked down. The earth beneath her boots remained untouched. No footprints, no broken leaves. The path had been made recently, deliberately. Misdirection. She smiled by herself. Not today. She turned in the opposite direction. Within 10 steps, she found an old stone staircase almost completely hidden beneath vines. It wasn't on the map. It didn't need to be. The map had expected whoever carried it to know how to ignore the lie. The staircase descended into cool darkness. At the bottom stood a circular chamber carved directly into stone. 3 bronze bells hung from wooden beams overhead. One was whole, one was cracked, one was missing. Only a frayed red cloth remained where it should have hung. Adaobi slowly reached into Mama Nkem's leather bag. The wrapped bronze bell fit perfectly into the empty space. Her breathing stopped. This had never been Mama Nkem's bell. She had been keeping it hidden, keeping it away. Footsteps echoed behind her. Mama Nkem emerged from the shadows, walking without her stick, without pain, without the slow movements of an elderly woman. You came. Adaobi stared. You followed me. No, the old woman smiled sadly. I arrived before you were born. Silence settled over the chamber. Then, Mama Nkem removed the grey scarf covering her hair. Beneath it, not grey, black, long, untouched by age. Adaobi's pulse prickened. Who are you? The old woman's answer came quietly. I've been asking myself that question for almost 300 years. The truth arrived piece by piece, not because Mama Nkem wished to frighten her, because some truths broke people if spoken all at once. Long before OBY'S existed, 3 women guarded something beneath the forest. Not treasure, not a spirit, a doorway. The bells did not imprison whatever lay beyond. They reminded the guardians when the doorway weakened. Every generation, one guardian passed the responsibility to another. Most refused. Some ran. A few accepted. But why me? Mama Nkem looked at the leather bag. You've been carrying the answer for weeks. The bag? The bell chose you the night you opened the hidden pocket. Adaobi remembered the dogs, the smiling child, Chike hearing voices, the wilted flowers, the map. None of them had been warnings. They had been recognitions. She hadn't stumbled into the mystery. The mystery had identified her. And the babies, Adaobi whispered. The smiling child. Mama Nkem nodded. They always know. They are born before forgetting. They see the guardians as they truly are. Adaobi's stomach tightened. You refused to deliver that baby because I knew the child would recognize the next guardian, you. The realization struck harder than fear. Everything she believed she had been investigating had actually been preparing her.
A low rumble shook the chamber. The whole bell began vibrating. The cracked bell answered. Only the empty space remained silent. Mama Nkem held out her hand. The 3rd bell. Adaobi hesitated. If I hang it, my watch ends, and mine begins. You have a choice. Do I? The old woman smiled. A real gen. You can walk away. The doorway will open eventually. Someone else will suffer because no guardian remained. Another tremor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Adaobi thought of Ngozi's baby, Chike, her father, the villagers who had trusted her. She had returned home believing knowledge alone could protect people. Now she understood. Knowledge meant little unless someone accepted responsibility for it. Without another word, she hung the bronze bell. The 3 bells rang together,
Not loudly, beautifully. The sound flowed through the chamber like calm water. Then, everything became still. The pressure vanished. The forest exhaled. Far above them, birds began singing again. When Adaobi turned back, Mama Nkem was gone. Not vanished, only her walking stick remained leaning against the stone wall. Beside it rested a folded letter. In careful handwriting were only 6 words. Every guardian begins as a skeptic. Years passed. Children continued to be born safely in OBY'S. The blood moon returned many times, yet no family ever feared it again. People noticed curious things about Nurse Adaobi. Dogs greeted her instead of fleeing. The old leather bag never seemed to wear out. And whenever a newborn entered the world beneath an unusually red moon, Adaobi always smiled first, as though waiting for someone else's smile in return. None ever came, not again, because the doorway beneath Ọchịchịrị Forest remained closed. The bells continued their quiet work, and somewhere beyond sight, something ancient waited patiently for another generation to forget why stories are told. The elders of OBY'S still say that education teaches a person how the world works. Tradition asks a different question. What if the world is larger than the part you've measured? Wisdom is not choosing one over the other. Wisdom is knowing that certainty has ended many more lives than curiosity ever did. And if you should ever walk through an old forest and hear a bronze bell calling your name, do not ask who is ringing it. First ask yourself, why did it know your name?